All right, so I have Brandon Sutton on the line, and he wrote an article for the progressivearmy.com about the white man who drove up from Maryland to New York to kill a black man, and he ended up killing a 66-year-old black man, stabbed him from behind, and the individual died. The man died. Brandon, thanks for calling in. You are covering this from the media perspective, how they are covering this story. Tell me more about the article you wrote.
Well, yeah, just for a quick breakdown, like you said, James Harris Jackson drove up from Baltimore on Monday. Well, actually, he came up on a bus on St. Patrick's Day from Baltimore, New York, with the express purposes of killing a black man, as the police have found out. And on Monday, he killed 66-year-old Timothy Kaufman. I want to say you have pronounced his name.
Yeah, Kaufman.
And an altercation in Manhattan in Hell's Kitchen. And so, I mean, it's like I said, my article says it's a relatively simple story. And after turning himself into the police, Jackson explained that he hated black men specifically who dated white women. He had felt that way for the past 10 years, and he had come to New York because New York was a media capital, and that he wanted to maximize the exposure and impact of him killing a black man to make a bigger statement. So, simple story, white supremacist, tragic, obviously. White supremacist kills black man in a terrorist attack. He was trying to instill terror and to accomplish his social-political aims. That's
definition of terrorism. Yeah.
The problem becomes with the way that the Daily News and the Post covered the death of
Mr. Kaufman.
Mr. Kaufman. Insofar they felt the need to include extraneous elements to the story and information that really had no bearing on the case, specifically the criminal history and medical history of Kaufman. And so far that he had been arrested 11 times for various crimes, and that he may or may not have had HIV/AIDS. That basically, the same trend we see when any time a black man is killed in the news. Just need to bring up his criminal history, the fact that it has no bearing on the case.
Wow. Okay. So I actually, because you just published this within the hour while we were on air, basically, and I did not know this, but they delved over into Mr. Kaufman's run-ins with the law and his health status. Like, they questioned whether or not he had HIV or AIDS, completely irrelevant to the tragedy at hand, completely irrelevant to the terrorist attack, the terroristic nature of this attack. Instead, they dehumanized the victim. For what effing purpose does that serve?
Well, I don't know what the purpose is. I can't speak to the intent of the writers, but what I can say is that what it does is it minimizes his death, right? By portraying him as a criminal or as having this disease, they are trying to minimize his death. And in the former case, by sort of creating this narrative that, well, a criminal who dies, that's sort of a lesser death, right? Because a criminal, once someone commits a crime, they're always a criminal, and criminals always commit crimes. So it implies that Kaufman was going to commit crimes in the future. The Post article goes so far as to calling him a career criminal, like to imply that he was a career criminal, and then they explain that in his dying moments that he was still resisting the cops and all other stuff. They don't even kind of imply that, hey, maybe he's in shock from being stabbed by a samurai sword, by a 26-inch sword, which is what Jackson was wielding when he killed him with. Narrative.
This might be one of, and maybe I shouldn't say this because the media never fails to surprise me, but this might be one of the most egregious iterations of this tactic, right? This is the man who is the victim. We see this standard play with like Michael Brown, right? Who is the victim, who's dead. His run-in was with a police officer. So the standard play is, let's find out everything bad about this kid so that we can help this police officer. Here is a man who expressly said that he's going up to kill black people because he wants to make a statement, and he hates black men in particular. And the media still uses the standard operating procedure of vilifying and dehumanizing the black person And you
And
see in
so,
your headline, your subhead title says, "What does this have to do with anything?" And I have to ask that question again. What the hell does this have to do with anything with regard to this
well,
murder?
so I, so I wrote an article about Mike Brown last week about why this happens, what the effect is, and we can't say what's in the mind of the writers. I've looked at the Daily News; they retracted some of the information and replaced his criminal history and his medical history with his hobbies and his interests, and like the fact that he liked music, and that he was like things that would humanize him, information that would emphasize the fact that this crime, that this murder was not based in any kind of, it was in no way based on the activities of Kaufman, because that's what this does, right? When you emphasize the past crimes of a person, it implies causality. It implies the fact that, hey, he might have been killed because he was a criminal. Who knows? I think that you're right. What makes it so egregious is that normally we see this in cases where the person is killed by the police, right? But as this is, as clear cut a case of white supremacist hate crime as you can get, and
They still use the
the
same
articles
play.
become further
Yeah.
yeah, become further egregious because they don't even refer to a man as a white supremacist. They don't even refer to Jackson as a white supremacist. They don't even refer to it really as a terrorist attack. They don't refer to it as any of these things. They just say that his hatred of black people, sort of really vague refusal to label it what it actually is. And not only that, but the Daily News article goes even further to sort of draw this false equivalency between this murder and the murder that occurred the murder of two police officers that occurred in 2014 in December.
Bed-Stuy? The two
Yes,
officers.
that's how the Daily News ends. Yeah, that's how the Daily News chooses to end their intends to in their article on the death of the murder of a black man, is to end the article with the crime committed by a completely unrelated black person against the police, and they decide to go full all lives matter for some reason.
Wow.
It is just egregious and confusing, and just it shows you the disdain for black life that exists in the media, and it really becomes like, well, what else can you call it?
Wow. I'm looking through your article now to try to find where you mentioned that about the killing of those two police officers back in about 3 years ago in Bed-Stuy. But Brandon,
December 2014.
December. I remember we were actually getting ready, and it's completely irrelevant. That's the whole thing. It's like 100% irrelevant to the conversation. But I remember it clear as day. And what they did is what they use it for is exactly what I just went through, right? What I just went through in my mind is the emotional attachment that I had to that incident because of my proximity to it, one. And then two, I was getting ready to take my family to New York for Christmas just to see the lights in Rockefeller Center. And then this happens a few days before Christmas. And so clearly we canceled our train tickets so that we wouldn't be down there in the middle of that. And what this does is when they pull this stuff up, it emotionalizes, if I could make that word up, it draws on the emotions, but it doesn't draw on the emotion to humanize this black victim. It draws on the emotion to make you fear the person who was brutally murdered by a coward white supremacist. This is go ahead.
So you know me, Ben. I'm not a journalist, but
You
just
just play
a
one
quick
on
note
TV.
to journalists.
Yeah.
I just play one on the internet, and at bars to tickle women. But here's what I will say. It's like you said, like if you put information in an article, by the nature of doing that, you make it relevant. You're making an argument that this information is in some way relevant to what the article is based on. Like what the precipitating event for that article is. So if you put his criminal history in, if you put the murder of two black police officers, you are making that information relevant to your argument, or rather to the events that occurred. And so it creates this situation where they are making these events relative. They're implying causality with his criminal history. They're implying this sort of weird. It's not weird at all, because they're implying basically that black people can be held for the actions of other black people. They're minimizing his death, by saying that the real tragedy is when black people kill cops. Am I right, guys? And it's like, but that's
That is
completely
so absurd.
irrelevant. And
Yeah.
sorry. And just take a step further, we see this again and again, like this refusal to refer to white supremacists as white supremacists, this refusal to refer to them as terrorists, but even more cogently, this refusal to attach their hate crimes to the larger ideology of white supremacy.
Right,
like
but their quickness
to say, okay,
but their quickness to let me to add this, and then we have to wrap it up. But they're very quick to tie in any black crime with all black people, and by referencing the incident in Bed-Stuy back in 2014, I believe 2013. Forgive me if I got the year wrong, but
they attach to Black Lives Matter.
Exactly, because that's exactly what they connected that to. That's exactly what they connected the New York murders to. I don't mean to cut you off, Brandon. I don't mean to cut you off, but we are already over time. Everyone go check out this piece on progressivearmy.com. This, as if the story wasn't tragic enough, now you have this compounding of insult to injury with the media vilifying and dehumanizing the victim. This is beyond victim blaming. This is destroying a man who has just been murdered by a cowardly white supremacist. Brandon, thanks for the call. And we'll be in touch and have you back on as soon as possible. Folks, we're all out of time. It's been a pleasure. Special thanks to my producers, David Grossman, Max I don't know if you want me to say your whole name on air. And all of you who make the Progressive Army and the Benjamin Dixon Show possible. I will see you next time.
The Benjamin Dixon Show is only possible with listener support. Go to www.thebenjamindixonshow.com to register for our blog, join the Progressive Army, and support the Benjamin Dixon Show. It's Ben Dixon. If you like this episode, be sure to share, like, and subscribe.
Consider becoming a Patreon. Go to www.patreon.com/The BPD Show and support The Benjamin Dixon Show.